Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 262 and 263. In these episodes, we find out what happened to Robin and why she is so worried about seeing other people that she has grown to care about go through the same thing. Also, there's an implication that maybe she's just a bad seed. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to the One Piece crew for commissioning this episode. Thank you guys so much. What's up? Anybody out there? So these two episodes, first I wanted to mention that I noticed it doesn't show up the same way when I'm using the Netflix app on the Roku TV that I have. But when I logged onto Netflix from my desktop in order to have the episode playing while I record, it showed me that this pair of episodes are the last two in the Water 7 arc. So now we're officially moving on to the arc of Enies Lobby. And it makes sense that the two episodes were put together for that reason, but I have to say it felt like not a lot happened in these two episodes. It was in terms of like forward plot movement, there were a lot of things occurring in a way that felt like I don't believe this is going to actually be relevant to anything, and I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe they will come up and it'll surprise me, but I found myself, this is like the first time in a while that I found myself like kind of spacing out while I was watching and not catching things and having to rewind because it seemed like we weren't really accomplishing very much other than sort of retreading a lot of either going over things again, which I mean that in like a figurative way, but also I haven't like taken the time to look and see if the runtime is significantly changed. But I've mentioned before how episodes now have the recap at the beginning that, reminds you whatever happened the previous episode. I had a moment in the second or the first of these two episodes where Robin tells Sanji, apparently my words mean nothing to you. And it cuts and like starts that moment again from about like 5 or 10 seconds earlier, as if it was recapping for somebody after a commercial break, like that kind of vibe. And I don't know if that's factored into the runtime and if it's like longer because of that, or if this is just another thing they're doing to sort of stretch it out and buy themselves some time. But considering that the recaps already just feel very redundant, having that moment, I was just like, what are we doing here now? And it wasn't a mistake it wasn't like a buffering issue or anything, because I rewound it and it happened again. It was just how it's put together. So I don't know, maybe it's just a mistake in the Netflix version, but it just caught me off guard to have in the middle of an episode, another thing stop and repeat itself, very literally repeat itself. So I think that has added in some ways to the feeling of just like, are we going to like handle anything or what? This episode begins, reminder, I may as well mention about the last one. We had T-Bone fighting Zoro. Zoro pretty much sleeps through like the rest of what happens here. But we start this episode off with all of the people in the CP9 cabin, or I guess train car, watching as Nero gets thrown down, and they're all just sort of commiserating with one another about how they didn't expect a lot out of the new batch of recruits. And yeah, Nero knows some things, like he knows some movements, but he hasn't been fully inducted and doesn't know it all. And the chef, whose name I'm forgetting, he is completely out. There's no suggestion that he's going to begin to stand up or anything. Lucci walks by him and kicks him out of the way. But Nero is struggling back to his feet again. And he is bleeding profusely, but he has still not decided to give the fight up. And yet he isn't in great shape. He's saying oh, now you're gonna get it. But he's barely able to bring himself to a standing position. And I love when he says, I'm gonna kill you, to both Frankie and Sanjay, and they just look at him like, yeah, okay, sure you are. So Lucci walks up to Nero, and Nero says, yeah, that's me. I'm the new recruit. He says something like, I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. Just let me kill him, and then I will come back and chat with you. And I had forgotten, because he says earlier, I don't care, before he says, I'm going to kill you. And I was like, you don't care? What do you mean? And then Lucci says here, our whole mission is not to kill them. That's the whole point. So you've let your emotions run away with you. So what he's saying is, I don't care what my orders are. I'm going to kill you because I fucking feel like killing you. And honestly, it's pretty embarrassing that he says that right in front of Lucci. He seems to think, I believe, that Lucci is going to be impressed that he says he's going to kill him. That's posturing, this sort of macho vibe. But it's clearly they care very much about their orders. They're not people who are just going to toss aside what they've been told to do in favor of how they feel in the moment. So it's just this vibe of a kid thinking that he's really saying something in front of his elders who wanted something extremely different out of him, and he seems completely unaware of the fact that they have a different expectation for him. Keeping them alive was just a suggestion, a guideline, but not necessarily a requirement. And it just is embarrassing. Dude, you have been given access to some power here that you could have if you just fucking looked around and saw who you were dealing with. But anyway, Lucci says you've got 3 seconds to run. And Nero's run from who? And as he realizes that Lucci is going to attack him, he's like, what are you talking about? No, don't do this. And he gets up and starts to run away. And Lucci has, he points at him with the one finger, which made me think that he was going to do finger pistol. And I don't think that's what he actually says to him. Finger pistol has seemed to be a really big deal when it was first done. But didn't Luffy get hit with it? And I don't feel like anything happened with that. He was injured for a minute and then it seemed to just go away. So later on in this episode, Usopp gets hit with it. And Usopp's always there's different standards for what he can put up with and not. So I'm not sure how worried about him I should be. If he did do the finger pistol, he did it in his back. So, yeah, it looks like it is, but usually they say finger pistol when they do it, and I don't remember him saying it. But anyway, this dude's just tossed off the side of the train into the water. And honestly, that is like kind of extreme. I don't know what the what the CP9 crew, like, their orders are, but to just be like, oh yeah, he was going to disobey orders, so I finger pistoled him and threw him off the train to drown. That just seems like kind of a big reaction. That's all I'm saying. Florian says Luffy was fine because he was made of rubber. A normal pistol also doesn't affect Luffy. I thought that we saw blood, though. Didn't we? Maybe I'm misremembering. Florian's home now, so now he can join in the conversation. Well, you're the only one here, Florian, so you have the whole floor. But anyway, he says something then like, if you haven't mastered Rokushiki, then you aren't superhuman. And I guess that's the name of whatever it is these guys have mastered, is Rokushiki. I don't remember if we've heard that word before. But either way, he just says, yeah, tell him the new guy sucked, and that's why he's dead. And I'm wondering if they're going to, do away with the mad chef as well. But I do appreciate both Frankie and Sanji watching this whole thing happen and being like, I don't know who's the good guy here? Like, what even is going on? Then we go back into the train car where we're with Robin and Corgi. And Usopp is hiding underneath Robin. Corgi is sniffing at the air. Now, I don't know if that's specifically meant to be like a tie-in with like his sense of smell and he's named after a dog. It's sort of weird because he doesn't look anything like a dog. Like, usually when there's this sort of theme going on, there's something in their appearance that's like meant to evoke, and he's got one of the more ordinary looks out of any of the bad guys we've seen. He's just really in basically a fedora and like a long black coat and like a white collared shirt, as far as I remember. So he's not distinctive, really. And I don't know what other powers he's got, but he claims that he can smell Usopp. And yet, the thing that tips him off is that he sees there are 3 legs underneath the cloak. So it's like, that's definitely not what your sense of smell isn't that good, because you couldn't tell anything from that. It wasn't until you saw his leg that you realized. And Usopp comes out. He's got a, like, I forget what they're called. Oh my God, you guys, what is it where you pull on it and you let it go? Why the slingshot? Fucking Christ. Sometimes I just wonder, am I losing it? But he's got a slingshot pointed at Corgi, and he fires it at him, but the camera like sort of pulls outside the cabin before we actually see it make contact, and we see a bright light, but that's all we get. So we don't actually see specifically what happened. And the whole situation with Robin and the way things get handled later, I was really like, are you listening at all, dude? I don't know. So I'm going to go to the conversation that Lucci has with Sanji. Lucci says, look, you guys are here to save Robin. And I get it. You want to save her because you think that there's some good in her. But that's not the case with everybody. Not all people are actually like able to be good. There are some people who are born under a bad star and are basically cursed from birth. And Robin is the type of person who everybody around her gets hurt. She makes life actively worse for everybody else. So don't you think that getting rid of her for the sake of the rest of the world is a good idea? Nico Robin is essentially, he calls her like poison, basically. He's like, you know, the poster, she was a little girl, but then he says ever since she can remember, her existence itself was a sin. She can make others happy simply by disappearing. That's the misfortune she carries, and she should have died 20 years ago. Now, here's the thing. I know that there's a lot of argument about nature versus nurture, and that's fine. I do think, though, that we are born with like innate personality traits, and nature versus nurture may teach us certain behaviors and stuff, but it won't necessarily change like the fundamentals of who we are as a person and what we enjoy. But the thing is, nobody has told any details about really anything Nico Robin has done yet. So hearing that, like, yeah, she was partnered with these crews and everybody in the crew wound up dead but her, and don't you think that's suspicious? Sure, I think that's suspicious. But that's all the information that you've given is just, oh, she walked away and they didn't. And that's not really anything. And so to then make this claim that like she's essentially cursed and that her entire existence since she was born was a sin, and then give absolutely no reason for that, is really strange. I don't understand what we're doing here. And this is kind of what I meant when I said that there wasn't a lot of forward movement. It's like, yeah, we're given some information about Nico's experiences when she was a child and the tragedy that she witnessed. But I want to know what it is that she has done. And I'm not getting any fucking straight answers. And I'm starting to wonder if we're ever going to get any straight answers. I can't tell. Like, is it just supposed to be that she has a mysterious past and we'll never get to hear the real motives behind any of it? And we just have to trust that she was once a badass, but she has now reformed? That doesn't seem to be how this show tends to go. But it also can be weird. Like, we saw Zoro's origins with learning how to become a swordsman, but we didn't see what his parents were like. He just showed up at this dojo from age, what was he, like maybe like 7 years old, 8 years old. And we only get that like one snapshot of that portion of his life. And that's about it. So it's sort of, you know, and we don't know anything about Luffy's history either. I don't know why he would frame this as, don't you think if that were the case, it would be better to kill her? I mean, if you want to make an argument that somebody will do more for the world if they are dead than alive, which I think is a thing. There are people that I think make the world worse, and the world will be better when they are no longer part of it. But if you want to make a massive claim like that to a person that you know is a friend of the folks that you're thinking of putting to death, you need to come up with an actual argument. It's just weird. He's talking to Sanji like Sanji knows what happened already. And maybe that's like he's under that assumption that Sanji is fully aware of whatever it is he's accusing Nico Robin of. But it just comes across weird to me as a viewer, because that's not the situation, and Sanji, I know, doesn't know the details of what she's done, but he doesn't ask the question. He basically just gets angry and is like, how dare you? Which, I mean, that's not an invalid response. It just feels in the moment like this dude is making some bold claims. Don't you want to know what's behind that? Like, what that's about? Sanji just shows absolutely no curiosity. And this has been the issue for me with this storyline in general. Like, everything that happened with the dude whose name I always forget, who can make ice. He is telling them about, like, the cruise that she's betrayed and stuff. And everybody basically is, like, putting their fingers in their ears and just going, nah, 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 can't hear you, can't hear you. I am fine with wanting to support your friend, but refusing to actually listen to a story or even ask a question about what somebody means, especially when that person is trying to justify killing your friend, it just feels like a weird way to handle it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So this scene was really strange because he's making all of these proclamations about the kind of person she is, fundamentally at her core, calls her existence a sin, and says that she makes the world better for everybody that she isn't around. And I'm like, why? Are you going to give any examples? No, he's not. And then after Sanji attacks him, he he says probably that Robin is going to, like, undergo terrible questioning for years. Like, and when saying questioning, I'm talking about torture at Enies Lobby. And he says the agony she'll experience before she dies. Again, you just said that maybe the world is better off without her. And that is a position that I can sometimes support in certain cases. But then you go on to be like, oh yeah, and she's definitely going to be, like, really terribly tortured. You're trying to convince them to not save her, dude. Why would you say that right here? That's the opposite effect. You know that, right? Like, is he purposely fucking with them? Like, what is he doing? This scene just felt really weird. And, like, I get that there is a certain amount of just, like, bad guy monologuing and posturing that we have to have. But they usually, there's a feel to them of, like, I get what your motivation is here. And I understand what you're trying for. And here, I just was like, you're all over the place, man. I don't know what you want. Like, are you trying to get them to attempt to rescue her so that you can go back on your word? Or because it doesn't seem like that's the case. He doesn't go back on his word. But truly, the whole thing here is just it just feels like so inconsistent. So Sanji just yelling, well, we're not going to let that happen. Of course, we'll save her. I'm like, of course he's saying that. You just talked about how she's going to be tortured for years before she's killed eventually. Like, what did you think he was going to say? So at this point, Usopp, he rolls through the door with Robin. She has basically walked out ahead of him. We do see that Corgi is on the ground and he's, like, smoking. So I'm assuming whatever it was that Usopp used on him was effective. But I really would have liked to see it because I just feel like Usopp gets so few wins. Let us watch his win here, you know? But nevertheless, she has busted through here even though Usopp was trying to keep her from coming this way. And immediately, Frankie is just like, oh yeah, she does look like the kid in the poster, actually. That's wild. Sanji's super excited to see her. And he says, hey, let's run away together. Something like that. Sanji, sir, I'm going to need you to fucking learn to stay on topic. You just are all over the place, man. You're going to leave the straw? Like, no, stop it. So anyway, she uses her power to yank Usopp to the floor. And Sanji is watching her and is like, what are you doing? Why did you just do that? And this is when she says, I guess my words mean nothing to you. And that's what she says in the dub, I should mention. I guess my words mean nothing to you people, is what I remember. In the sub here, she says something like, even if I explain, you guys just won't get it. And she looks like really pissed when she says it. And the expression on Sanji's face is surprised. But because Usopp is the one that she said, why doesn't like what I want factor in here? And Sanji wasn't there for that. I kind of wanted her to have her moment here of like explaining herself. And she doesn't. Instead, we get, and this is the moment, like I said, you guys, that weirdly repeats itself exactly. I'm watching it happen yet again. Instead of like asking why won't we get it? Or Usopp saying, well, I know you said we don't pay attention to what you want. She just says, you won't get it, will you? And then Lucci starts laughing. And this is what I mean, you guys. This felt like everybody was in a different scene. I don't understand any of what's happening here. She's talking to Sanji like she had the conversation with him instead of Usopp about them not listening to her. She says, even if I explain, you won't get it. Nobody responds to that. Nobody makes any claim that, no, yes, we will get it. Or if we're doing the dub version, my words mean nothing to you. And he doesn't say, what do you mean your words? What does that even mean? And then she could say, I don't want to be rescued. Why doesn't my opinion count for anything? If they had that conversation here, that would make sense. But instead she says this, nobody reacts to that or responds to that. Lucci just starts laughing for reasons that I don't understand at all. I don't know if it's just supposed to be like I'm the villain and that's what I have to do here. And then Usopp turns to Franky and tells him to detach the train car. And Franky basically sacrifices himself. He does detach the train car, but he does it in such a way that he winds up stuck with the CP9 guys. And at first it looked like what Usopp did was the thing that helped them, because he like casts a smoke bomb so that they can all run onto the next train car and get out of there and nobody will notice. But of course, these are very experienced people and they know better. And as Usopp is running with Robin under his arm, she is yelling for him to let her go. Like, it just, all of this scene, it feels like the dialogue doesn't go with each other. And it was really confusing to watch. It was like, and I think this is part of why when I said earlier that I stopped and rewound, it was because I felt like I had missed something, because what a person said in response to a thing felt irrelevant to what they had just said. And I was like lost and convinced, did I just like kind of like, kind of lose my attention for a minute in a moment where this was explained? So I would rewind it. And I did that like probably 6 times in the course of watching these 2 episodes. And that was never the case. Nothing was explained. There was no reason for the way these conversations, if you can even call them that. It doesn't even feel like conversations. It feels like a series of declarations that are completely detached from one another. So we jump from there, the smoke bomb thing where Usopp thinks that he's the one who saved the day, but he isn't, and it turns out there's a fucking door maker. I didn't know it worked the way it does, which we will talk about. But we go to the, what do you call it? Oh my God, Rocket Man. And Luffy is looking, he's like at the front of the train, and he is saying to turn back. He's just yelling it. And everybody underneath in the actual train cars is like, what do you mean? Why do you want us to turn back? And I'm thinking, like, they can't turn back anyway. There's no brake. I thought we had been over this. That's not mentioned. Everybody just wants to know why. It turns out he's not even yelling at them. He's yelling at the frog, whose name is Yokozuna, who is the front crawl frog, I'm pretty sure. And he is right in the way of the Rocket Man train. And the Rocket Man hits him and winds up getting derailed. Now, this is the other thing. You know, it's derailed. The whole thing, I thought, with the way the sea trains run, is that they need the rail, right? Like, is the Rocket Man, once it's derailed, basically just a boat now? I don't understand what happened if it got derailed, but it's still running. I thought the entire point of the sea trains is that the infrastructure was necessary or they wouldn't function. So if you don't have the rail for them to rest on, they just sink. And granted, the sinking, like the way the rail is set up and the infrastructure for that doesn't make any sense to me in any way, but I'm willing to accept that, you know, but I don't understand how this works. If the rail isn't necessary, then what are we doing? Let's see. Florian in the chat is saying, think you're not supposed to get it. First time watching, I was on the same boat as you are. Gabriella says they both need it and don't. It can go faster and it has a more straightforward direction while on the rails, but they're still designed as ships. Florian says, I think it works without rail for staying on the water, but it is needed for steering. Huh. Okay. I guess. I don't feel like that was made clear at all. Like, it really felt like the whole thing is that they wouldn't run, it wouldn't work if we didn't have rails. And they look too much like a regular train. You know, like if they looked like they were meant to be also buoyant, but they aren't drawn that way. So it just feels like there was so much that went into talking about, here are the ways in which it would be possible to make this happen. Like, he was under so much questioning when he brought up the concept of the sea train and had to go into a lot of detail about the way they would be built and how it would work. I really would have liked it if it was mentioned there that they would be buoyant and just sort of directed by the rails, but not necessary, like not reliant on them, you know? Because once he says like the train has been derailed, I thought for sure it was going to be, oh, the train is sinking and now we have to find another, you know, another option. And maybe everybody would wind up riding on the two weird, I can't remember the name of them, but the two weird sea monsters that are called Sodom and Gomorrah, which is pretty funny. okay, so we don't, so it's just, it is a ship, but they're not, you can't steer them as well without the rail. Okay. Yeah, I didn't get that at all. This was puzzling. So the whole like bit here with the frog, there's a moment in which somebody says that because Kagura, is that her name? She can speak with the frog, it must mean that she is part frog. And I think, I can't remember if it's Zoro who says it, but somebody says like, well, I guess that makes sense. She barely passed for human anyway. But I am here to ask you guys, is this like supposed to literally be true? Because she is super weird looking. And I don't like, you know, she's been weird looking from the beginning. And normally I would be tempted to be like, oh, you know, she's got that round body shape that's sort of odd. And it does kind of look like the frog's body. So maybe that's actually meant to be literal. But we saw her in the flashbacks where she had like the super curvy, you know, like hourglass figure, not like the frog at all. So then I was like, oh, wait, no, maybe she's not. But she knows how to talk to him. So that's pretty wild. Kokoro, thank you. What's Kagura? I feel like I got that from something. But this little frog guy, evidently, he has been trying to like strengthen himself by going up against the train so that he can ensure that nobody else he cares about can get taken away on the sea train. Because that is what happened to, what was his name? I'm wanting to say Roy, but I know that that's not right. But I'm starting to wonder if that guy, like, everybody's acting like he's dead. And I'm wondering if he even is. Because as far as I know, nobody saw him die, right? We just had Frankie throw himself in front of the train to try and stop it. He wound up in pieces and had to repair himself. And as I don't recall anything being mentioned about his like actual execution or finding a body or anything. So maybe that dude is still out there somewhere. Florian says Tom. Right. Thank you. So, and the frog was there when Frankie went against the train. Right. And Frankie is the one who taught him to do the front crawl, which felt like a really odd way to spend your time. But Frankie is just that guy, isn't he? So why not? So, yeah, I'm wondering if this frog is going to, because I said at the start of this that it felt like a lot of things happened that don't really seem all that meaningful in the moment. And this is one of those things for me, like this issue with the frog showing up here and crashing into the train. We needed to get derailed, I guess. That was like the main accomplishment, was that this frog got them off the path where they were going to wind up smashing into the train in front of them again. But as far as the presence of the frog here, like, what does that do? Because you could just have it that they got derailed somehow and it wouldn't have to do with any living thing. It would just, maybe an obstacle, something. So if the frog is the factor, I feel like the frog has to come into play. And I don't know what that's going to look like. So I'm going to jump back because, like I said, they detached the train, Frankie and Usopp and Sanji grabbing Robin. And the whips, those like huge, horrible, thorny whips, come out and grab the train car before it can fully detach. And I just hate those damn things so much. I really do. But they yank the cars together in one jolt. It's really quite impressive, actually. I can't even be mad about it. And Sanji, I love when Bluno is like, dude, did you really think that this was going to work? Like, come on. And Sanji just says something like, well, it was worth a try. Like, come on. So Sanji attempts to kick him in the head. Of course, this dude does Iron Body, and he just doesn't have any reaction. I felt kind of bad. Sanji is so used to like just handling shit. And he goes into like full on B-boy mode here. And it doesn't do anything. This dude like kind of flinches. That's about it. And as much as it didn't actually do what Sanji wanted, the other CP9 guys are like, all right, well, that was a pretty good try. But this dude, all he did was just like grimace. That's it. I never like seeing Sanji specifically be completely outclassed. I don't know why. Like, Luffy doing something and a person having no reaction makes sense because Luffy often just miscalculates things. He doesn't pay enough attention in the beginning and doesn't make a judgment call. And Zoro tends to underestimate a lot of people. So when he is sort of outclassed, I'm always just like, well, maybe you shouldn't go around thinking you're just better than everybody, Zoro. But Sanji, it feels like he tends to be pretty respectful of those around him until proven otherwise. And when he gets shown up, it's just sort of more painful somehow. So this is the point at which, again, Robin takes down Usopp using her arm powers. And when Sanji says why, she says, how many times do I have to tell you? Leave me alone. As she says that, Square Nose says you should learn to pay attention and kicks Sanji in the head. And I will say, as much as the you should learn to pay attention was meant for him coming up in a sneak attack, I also do think that part of it was about the fact that she has been telling you that she doesn't want this, and you are just ignoring that. So you should really learn to like actually hear what the people around you are saying. But this is the moment where fucking Frankie leans forward and he just literally like pushes the cars apart. But it doesn't do any fucking good, because then that dude can just make a door, which just seems profoundly unfair. I cannot, with the fact that this is possible. I know that this dude had that door fruit, or whatever it is. And I thought it was like, oh, I can just crawl through spaces. Just, you know, there's a wall between us and I can get in there. That's what I thought. But this dude, this is portal magic. This is very different. This is a portal from wherever to wherever, which is a whole other fucking thing. And y'all, I have said, I think before, I don't know if it's on the show, but certainly on my shows somewhere, there have been conversations about the kinds of superpowers that you would like to have. And my number one has always been, I would want to be able to teleport, because traveling is a complete drag. There is like almost nothing about traveling that is a good time. It's a ton of waiting in lines. It's a ton of being locked in very small spaces, very small bathrooms, up against people you don't know, many of whom are sick and they're carrying germs and they're getting you sick, and bad food and recycled air. It's just not fun. I know it's part of the experience, but like, honestly, if I could just open a door and even short-term traveling in the car, I hate it. I really do. Like, if I could just open a door and be at the Walmart dairy section. And look, ideally, I'm at the dairy section, I grab my milk, I climb back through the portal to my house. I would love that. But let's say I decide to be good and actually pay for it. Walk out the portal in the dairy section, walk through a portal at the register, pay, and then walk through a new portal at home. Ugh, can you imagine? That would be beautiful. I just swear, I'm so jealous of this power. I swear to God. This is way too powerful. It's too much. And the look that Sanji gets when he realizes that Blueno is behind him, he is just like, oh, this is not what I signed up for. And I was like, yeah, I can't be mad at you, dude, because that really does suck. So Blueno comes through that portal. He really socks Usopp one, by the way. Gets him good. And again, with Sanji trying to kick him and him using Iron Body. And I felt so bad. He grabs Sanji by the ankle and smashes him into the ground like the Hulk does with Loki. And it was just embarrassing. That's the absolute most humiliating way to be taken down. So at this point, Robin, she grabs him up with all of her arms. And she's like, the deal was that you don't hurt them. I am not trying to run away. So what are you doing? And he's like, they're fucking coming at me. I can't help it. And she says, all right, well then let's get the fuck out of here so that we can be done with this. And this is when Usopp says, all right, so what it is that you're still hiding something from us, huh? And he says, by the way, if you're part of a crew, you can't leave the crew without the captain's permission. So don't give up on Luffy. And then we get this flashback of her looking on this huge conflagration. Everything is on fire. And she's a little kid and she's crying. And this is when Blueno chimes in and starts talking about what happened. Because, again, Robin isn't about to fucking share. She, walks through that portal and is just not going to have this, conversation at all. Blueno is the one who's like, we're not breaking the agreement because an island many years ago ceased to exist. It was burned to the ground without a trace by a buster call that was issued by the Marines. Nico was the only survivor of that attack. And basically, they know that she went through this horrible trauma as a little girl, and they just use the trauma and the terror of that against her for the rest of her life. And the whole thing, I love Sanji being like, wow, so you guys knew and you used it against her. And I thought to myself, of course they did. And then Blueno says, of course. And I was like, oh no, I have the same dialogue as a bad guy. That's not good. Blueno walks back through the portal and says, I do sympathize with her, but what we're doing is for the sake of justice. And we got to do what we got to do. And Sanji chases after him and aims a kick, but it does not hit. The portal just sort of whoosh into thin air as his foot goes through it. And it was just a sort of, again, a weird, it's a piece of information about her history, but we don't know why that attack was called or what was going on there. So it's really weird to see her as a little kid traumatized by these things when there's really no context to any of it at all, especially considering the way that Lucci was talking about her having been a bad seed since she was born. That the implication to me is that she did something to cause the Buster Call to come down on them. And I don't know what that could even be, but if he's blaming her for what the Marines did, I don't know how I feel about that. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. But it's a weird piece of the puzzle to get at this point. You know, it just, and I don't have a problem with things being told out of order exactly, but there is a point where it doesn't even feel exactly like a clue. It just feels like, do you know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know how to put this. It's just kind of confusing. That's all. So anyway, this is when Kokoro is talking about how they got like taken off of the tracks, and Nami offers to help navigate and everything. Everybody else is just kind of like, God damn it, what the hell with this frog? And at this point, all of the like Frankie pirates have to rejoin with each other and have a moment of reminding themselves that the point of being on this mission is to rescue Frankie. And this is when they call out to Sodom and Gomorrah, who just go like, they basically roar essentially, but in their weird, like kind of horsey way. This is when they look through their binoculars and they see a random floating train car, which we know who this is. And this moment when Sanji like opens the door and he just stands there looking out at them and he is so cranky. There's just something about this. And one of the guys says, "That's spring eyebrows," which, the fact that that is what everybody notices about him, and yet I forget all the time that his eyebrows are like that, really says something. I have just gotten so used to his bizarre look that whenever they remind me he has those, I'm like, spring eyebrow. Oh, yeah. They just do not stand out. Back with the CP9 guys, they are telling the Ennis Lobby people, like, we can see you on the horizon, we're headed in, and we've brought a bunch of criminals with us. We have Frankie talking to Robin, and he's finding out that Iceberg is still alive, because he definitely thought Iceberg was dead, so he's really happy. And then he starts, I'm going to read this here, because Robin is just not interacting with him, so he has to carry the whole conversation. The government now has successfully obtained 2 keys. Me, who owns the weapon's blueprints, and you, who can revive the existing weapon. And when that power actually appears in this world, the government will naturally put an end to the pirate era. And after that, this power the military has is going to be too much for it to handle. And it's going to like shake up the entire world. Our master didn't give up the blueprints to be protected for a horrible future like that. And she is saying, even if I could escape, it's pointless. Just leave me alone. And he's insisting that she find a way to go back to the Straw Hats. But she says, I hurt them just by being with them. And then we get the flashback to Lucci saying her existence itself is a sin. But again, we don't get a explanation for this. It's just him saying that, and then Frankie reassuring her, you're not the one hurting them. The people from the government say your existence is a sin. But no matter how dangerous you may be, you being alive isn't a sin. Who you are isn't a sin. And we have that moment where Tom is saying, a flashback to Tom saying to Frankie, no matter how, like, what a ship is made out of, it's not good or bad. It just is. And then it's what you do with it. And this is supposed to be a very like inspiring sort of speech based on you can be yourself and it can do the world good, even if they think it can't, just based on your choices. But because he keeps arguing with this line of her existence itself is a sin, and I have no idea what would even make him say that, Frankie arguing with that assertion doesn't work, because he's just basically like, just make better choices. And I'm like, yeah, but what has she done though? Like, what is it that makes him think that from a literal infant she was no good already? What I've got on the outside looks like it agrees with Frankie, but he's acting like he knows the deal, and he doesn't know the deal, and I don't know the deal. So this whole like sort of speech that is supposed to be the TED Talk of how to keep your head up and keep it going, I just was like, I can't fully agree, because there are some people out there that I'm like are not quite right, and they are a hazard. There are people who enjoy doing bad things, and not that Robin has that vibe to her, but the whole way that this is being presented, it lacks any evidence. So him arguing against it doesn't have any support either. It's just a weird conversation and a weird argument to keep having with the memory of a guy saying something out of context about a person you don't know. But anyway, so that is how he's talking to her, and she has like that wide-eyed moment of just, it obviously whatever he said seemed to really hit her, but it's not a there's no real change in her demeanor or anything. She doesn't do anything. We see the train pulling up to Ennis Lobby and her getting off, and all of the dudes just being like, she's beautiful. And then the rest of the CP9 guys leading them out and sort of guarding them. And the crowds they're walking past are recognizing Frankie, calling him Cutty Flam. And the inside, they go through the gates to Ennis Lobby. And the gates open onto like basically a huge valley made out of a waterfall that just falls from every direction. There's just like a tiny peninsula of land, and the land isn't resting on anything. It's just free floating without any water or earth underneath it. Like, it's wild looking. It looks really cool. And I do appreciate how much when he sees it, Frankie is just like, what the fuck is this? Like, sometimes I take it for granted that everybody in the world that isn't the Straw Hats, that they have seen all the places already, or are used to seeing weird things to the point where it doesn't faze them anymore. So whenever there's somebody who's like not part of our crew who is also like, wow, what the fuck? It's just sort of reassuring that like, okay, everybody is constantly surprised at what exists in this world. And I kind of like that personally. But yeah, that's how it ends, is him just like looking out, and he says something like there's a hole in the ocean, which isn't really the way I would say that, but it isn't like a bad way to say it. I see what he means. All right. So, Florian in the chat says, I don't like to say this, but can't wait on your take on how this all turns out. Don't want to build expectations. All right. Well, no, I did see. I was about to say I didn't see that Gabriella was here, but I did see Gabriella. I quoted you earlier. Never mind. But hi again. All right. I'm going to wrap. Thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. I'm very curious where this is going. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Unspoiled Network podcast.